Welcome back to News in Focus. While Israel continues its violation of the ceasefire in the occupied in Gaza, I beg your pardon, in the occupied West Bank, raids and deadly attacks continue to occur. Last week, Israeli forces shot fatally two Palestinian men at point-blank range after they appeared to surrender to troops. The killings were captured on video, showing the two men coming out of a garage, holding their hands up and lifting their shirts to show they are not carrying explosives. The troops later shot the man dead. Joining me now to take this discussion forward and, of course, discuss what is happening in the occupied territory, I'd like to welcome Palestinian journalist Osama Nazzal, who is based in Jenin in the occupied West Bank. Osama, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and shukran so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum assalam. It's my pleasure. You're welcome.
Yeah, Osama, I want to go to this video because it was your cousin Ahmed who, of course, shot the footage of this happening. And when you look at it, it once again puts this statement forward: Israel's crimes in the occupied West Bank is there for all to see, and we, the world, are just watching this unfold.
Yes. This crime committed by the Israeli occupation forces against two Palestinian young men in the city of Jenin is not isolated from the general context of the Palestinian people under the Israeli occupation, as this is one crime of many crimes that are regularly and daily committed by the Israeli occupation forces. Just while we are talking now, the Israeli forces killed 17-year-old Palestinian boy in the southern of the occupied West Bank in the region of Hebron, and another man in Ramallah region, and it's closing most of the occupied West Bank. I'm speaking from the Palestinian town of Qabatia, southern Jenin, and it is living right now under Israeli curfew, and Israeli forces are preventing people their right to movement or to usual business. The same is happening in the area of Tubas or the Jordan Valley area that has been under aggressive Israeli military campaign for more than 5 days. So this is the Israeli occupation. This is the colonial mentality. This is what the Israeli occupation inherited from the British colonial power that existed Israel in Palestine and in the region. And of course, all these crimes are not justified whatsoever the condition is, and it just reflects the real mentality and the real image of Israel as a colonial occupation power.
And that's the thing, Osama. This isn't an isolated incident, what we saw last week. And you mentioned that word, and I think it's important for the viewers to understand. This has been happening even way before October the 7th, 2023, because I remember weeks before, there were raids that were happening in Jenin, where you are based at this moment. And it shows that the project of Israel to go ahead and really eat up the land within the occupied territory really has a historical significance to it.
Without any doubt that the 7th of October is not the date when history in Palestine started, as the question of Palestine started in 1917 when Balfour declared that Palestine is going to be the homeland of the Jewish people. From that point, the problem started, and Palestine and the Palestinian people were the real victim of the First World War, and it was incarnated and manifested clearly as a result of the Second World War, as the Western colonial powers, including Britain, the United States, France, and others, presented Palestine as a gift to the Jewish people in order to serve the colonial power. So Israel is presenting like a military base that guarantees the colonial power's interest in the Middle East. But Israel and its allies try to portray to the world that all started after the 7th of October. When we talk about the 7th of October, we talk about more than 70 years of intimidation, of subjugation, of murder, of deprivation, of land grab, of settlement building, and all these violations of basic human rights committed by Israel against the Palestinian people. And what makes the Israeli colonization of Palestine different, for example, from the American colonization of Iraq or from the French colonization of Algeria, is that Israel does not recognize the existence of the Palestinian people on Palestine. And according to the Talmudic teachings of Israel, that there is nothing called Palestine. It's the land of Israel belonging to the Jewish people. And that's why they press the word to recognize Israel as a Jewish state in order to have like a justification for having no Palestinian between the river and the sea. And what happened in Gaza over the past 2 years is very clear. The genocide, the mass murder of the Palestinians in order to empty Gaza of its people. And what's happening in the West Bank is not much different, as Israel is practicing ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians here, but maybe in a different way, through restrictions, through the closure regime, through increasing poverty rates and employment rates in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem, as well as home demolition and settlement building.
Osama, we're going to be using these two names even in the next segment, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. What we are seeing there is that especially Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has been walking through the Al-Aqsa compound right in front of Masjid Al-Aqsa to really provocate many of the settlers, the Israeli settlers who are going into villages of the occupied West Bank and taking the land. How much of this provocation really has led to the settlers, who are of course aided and abetted by the Israeli army, to first of all chase away Palestinian families and of course take the land for themselves?
Yeah. First, it is not a matter of Ben-Gvir or Smotrich. It is a matter of the colonial system on which the Israeli entity is based. And what Ben-Gvir is doing is just implementing the teachings, the instructions, and the rules of Israel as an occupying colonial power. These teachings that are inherited from Jabotinsky, who talked about the Iron Wall, and the founders of the entity of Israel, who had many statements since the establishment of Israel that they want to have Palestine empty of the Palestinian people. These are the teachings and the rules of the fathers of the Zionist movement, whether Herzl, Ben-Gurion, Jabotinsky, and Ben-Gvir, Netanyahu, Smotrich, and the Israeli occupiers today are just implementing these rules and these principles of the Zionist movement. And it is really regrettable to see the Israeli officials, whether Ben-Gvir or others, storming into the plaza of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Muslim world is not acting to protect this Muslim holy site, Al-Aqsa. Concerning the Israeli settlers' attacks on the Palestinian villages and towns that happen every day, this is part of the Israeli colonial policy, and these settlers are working in groups that are organized, funded, and supported by the Israeli occupation government. And you can watch many videos showing how the Israeli Minister of Home Security handing over guns and bombs for these settlers to use them against the Palestinian citizens.
But that's the thing, isn't it, Osama? They're giving them the guns. And I want to ask, as somebody who's based in the occupied West Bank, when you hear Donald Trump, the US president, of course, who is the strongest ally of Israel, saying Israel cannot annex more land in the occupied West Bank, and here they are doing it right here. It becomes difficult, doesn't it, for any Palestinian to look at Donald Trump and say, well, we're going to actually believe you because you say one thing, but on the other side, the Israeli government is giving the freedom to the settlers and its army to go ahead and annex more land.
Yeah, furthermore, that all the weapons and the ammunition that Israel is using against the Palestinians, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank, these weapons are made by the United States, given to Israel by the United States. So the people in Palestine are killed by the American weapons at the hands of the Israeli occupation soldiers and the Israeli settlers. And when we talk about Donald Trump and his attitude towards Israel-Palestine question, we should remember that during his first term, he declared the deal of the century. And the implementation of the deal of the century means what Israel is doing now, that Jerusalem is the eternal united capital of Israel, and that Israel has the right to have control over the settlements that it's building in the occupied West Bank, and just giving the Palestinian people very symbolic thing that is much short of their basic rights. So the Palestinian people won't be deceived by the American president and the American administration, and that is the history of the political agenda of the United States, whether under the Trump administration or any other American administration. Even when Barack Obama was the president of the United States, nothing changed when it comes to Palestine, Israel.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Osama Nazzal. We're going to be going from the occupied West Bank to Gaza and Israel's violation of that ceasefire. The conversation continues after the break. Tuesday. Back to News in Focus. While, of course, we have the discussing attacks and raids happening in the occupied West Bank, Israel's violation of the Gaza ceasefire continues. And Osama, when we look at it, I guess both you and I thought, okay, maybe, just maybe, we may just have a break in the killing, in the murder, in the destruction that has been happening in Gaza. Unfortunately, once again, we were proven wrong. And Israel continues to do this. One of the latest ones, and I find this quite absurd, is that two young lads, had crossed the so-called yellow line, and on that basis, Israel said it was a violation of the ceasefire. If that's not ridiculous, I honestly don't know what it is.
Yeah, this is the problem that the Palestinians in Gaza are facing today, that what we have in Gaza is not a ceasefire. What we have in Gaza is reduced fire. But the problem that the world got convinced that Israel stopped its genocide campaign against the Palestinian people and stopped pressuring Israel to end that. But on the ground, the genocide is still continuing, but maybe in a different mode and a different way. Since the declaration of the ceasefire, Israel has killed over 300 Palestinian citizens of the Gaza Strip. Since the declaration of the ceasefire, Israel has not allowed the opening of Rafah crossing for entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. And the humanitarian aid getting from the Israeli points into Gaza are not enough to salvage the catastrophic situation that the people in Gaza are living. The hospitals are still suffering shortage of medicine, of injections, and of medical supplies. The Palestinians who have no homes because Israel destroyed over the 90% of Gaza buildings are living in tents, and these tents are torn and worn these days.
Yeah.
And they cannot protect the people against the climate condition because we are getting into winter in Palestine. And I really can't imagine how the women and the children of Gaza are going to spend this winter. We are going to witness a lot of hypothermia cases, and many babies are going to get frozen to death because of the Israeli siege and the difficult humanitarian situation there.
And that's the thing, Osama, because they are blocking the aid. The aid that is coming is not the agreed amount as per the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. So it states quite clearly that every single agreement within the ceasefire, Israel has made sure that it wants to go ahead and renege on it, number one, and to make sure that their aim, and let's call it for what it is, there are members of the Israeli government, and they are the ones who sum up the entire cabinet of Israel in its quest to go ahead and ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people. And this is happening right now. When you see what is happening within the winter months in Gaza, this ethnic cleansing is now going to take another new phase, and the world is just watching by and really doing nothing about it.
Yeah, any colonial power on earth won't change its track and its attitude without having a force that would pressure it and force it to track down on its attitudes and its methods. And sorry to say that the international community is condoning the Israeli crimes and the Israeli policies against the Palestinians. And when we look at the Arab and the Muslim world position, it is a very poor, it is a very weak position. So Israel believes that it can do whatever it wants without having anyone to stop it, which means that there is no deterrence power to deter the Israeli colonial project in the region. And Israel is based on the expansionist mentality, which is to occupy more land, not to give back more land. And that's why Israel is occupying, and it's not going to withdraw from 53% of Gaza, which is the yellow line area. And the sponsors of the agreement, the Americans, the world is not taking any practical step to force Israel to change its mind. At the same time, it is attacking the Palestinians in the red area, or the area under where the Palestinian population is concentrated, just the way it is doing in Lebanon. So this is Israeli idea, to Lebanonize Gaza, to hit whenever it wants, to kill whenever it wants, to prevent the reconstruction of Gaza, and in the end, to leave no opportunity for the Palestinian people, but to think of leaving the land in order to find a life, a future for themselves and for their children. Because to continue living in Gaza under these conditions, it's impossible. No hospitals, no schools, no housing units, no agriculture. It is the wasteland that George Eliot talked about in his poem, The Wasteland.
Osama, and that's where I come to the next question. The so-called International Peace Board, which Donald Trump, of course, seems to be the chair of, and the discussions around whether former British Prime Minister Tony Blair will get involved in this. It becomes difficult for this to happen because there's an international stabilization force which may have a number of Arab and Islamic countries, and yet Israel refuses to allow that part of the phase of the ceasefire to occur. And when you see that refusal happening, it only means one thing. Israel wants to continue this plan of theirs of the ethnic cleansing. And there's not much that can be done because they have the United States of America to go ahead and shield them from whatever supposed proposals comes from the International Stabilization Force and other countries within the Middle East and the Muslim world.
We can't say it is the port of peace. It is the port of business people, millionaires, the trillionaires who want to exploit the suffering and the catastrophe and the blood of the Gaza people in order to increase their wealth and to enlarge their companies. That is the aim of the American plan. Were the Americans serious about achieving peace in the region, they would not set a peace board. They would allow the Palestinian people, the Palestinian Authority, which is created in accordance with international conventions and international agreements, and the agreement with the Israeli occupation side itself. They would allow the Palestinian Authority to have control and governance in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, just the area slated for the Palestinian statehood according to the United Nations. Were they serious about real peace in the region, I think they would have forced Israel to accept of the presence of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza and allow the Palestinian people to govern themselves by themselves without the need for this board or for the multinational security force they are talking about.
One final question, Osama. Pope Leo, he's been doing a visit across many of the Muslim nations as recent as Lebanon. And he said the only solution to this is a two-state solution. But he's mentioned, of course, that Israel, quite frankly, does not want to even speak about a two-state solution. How important was he recognizing that Israel does not want to even discuss this, knowing that when you listen to Benjamin Netanyahu and the right wing of this Israeli cabinet, they're not interested in this two-state solution, which, of course, begs the question, why speak about it? Why speak about the two-state solution when clearly one party is not interested in it and they do not want to have anything to do with Palestinian statehood?
You know, the problem is that the international community, the European countries, and all the world leaders who talk about the two-state solution and those who recognize the two-state solution are using the two-state solution as a way out for their humanitarian complex, you know, that they know that their human duty and moral duty is to stop a bloodshed and to stop Israeli genocide. But they don't want to do that. So in order to justify that for themselves, they talk about the two-state solution without taking any tangible step on the ground to materialize the two-state solution. What the Palestinians need, first and foremost, is justice. This is what we care about. And when we talk about justice, we talk about stopping the bloodshed, stopping the Israeli siege, ending the Israeli occupation, and allowing the Palestinians to practice their right of self-determination. So this is a big problem that we are facing as Palestinians today, that world leaders are using the two-state solution to convince their peoples and to convince themselves that what they are doing to the Palestinians is enough. But on the ground, it's a zero-sum game.
Osama, absolute pleasure having you on. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you.
That's Osama Nazzal, a Palestinian journalist based in Jenin in the occupied West Bank. That's all we have for you here on News in Focus. If you've missed today's episode, you will be able to find it on our YouTube channel. From myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.